Hey, how's it going, guys? Kaleidal back here again with another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how we're going to go about making the material for this skull I had created in my recent tutorial. I did take a little bit to make this video, which is part 2 of the previous one. And that's just because I ended up getting a little bit busy. But we're here again, so let's go ahead and do this. So here's the basic setup for this material. It's not anything complex. It's just a specular material with some transmission. Um, and I'll go ahead and walk you through how I created it, and then I'll just show you how I created my basic lighting setup for this scene. And this is an Octane render. So let's go ahead and get that started. Okay, so in the roughness tab, I did end up using the marble texture here, and then I also used that in the bump. The marble texture is quite great actually for some organic effects. So I'll go ahead and actually show you what this looks like. Now the version of Octane I'm running, which is 3.07 R2, it has an issue where it doesn't display the solo node correctly. So if I were to try and solo, let's say the multiply node, and over here, I see it's all black. And if I try to maybe solo out the marble texture, it's still not going to make any difference here. Let me just make sure it's reloaded. So another way I can work around this would be to, yeah, so you can see right there, that's not exactly what the texture looks like. So in order to see what it looks like, I'll just go ahead and create another diffuse material. I can just apply to this skull here, and let's get this. Yeah, we'll actually go ahead and grab all of these nodes here that are connected to the roughness, and you can just copy, and I'll go ahead and go into my diffuse material and just paste it, rearrange it, and connect it to the diffuse. So there we go. So that's quite a bit different from what you were seeing in the preview, which is pretty much why I do this instead. I do believe they did end up fixing it in Octane v4, so that might not be much of an issue now. But for the version I'm running, that's what you can do to get past that. So now that we can see what this is doing, we can see that the roughness looks quite good because of the overall effect this has on this skull. So it's not uniform at all. You can see some areas have the texture and some areas don't have as much of it. And you can also change this however you want. If you go right here into the scale, you can change it to whatever you like. I did just like how this one looked like, so that's what we're going to go with. So here are the settings for the projection of the marble noise if you want to recreate this texture. And you're free to change it however you like in order to get any result you might be a bigger fan of. So here is the settings for the marble noise. That's how I got this result here. So you can also follow along if you're interested. And then we have a color correction that I plugged it into. I just ended up decreasing that gamma value. Or actually, I do believe I might have, um, yeah, I believe I might have ended up increasing it. I think the default is usually 0, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I ended up decreasing or increasing this, sorry. And actually, I do like this a little bit more. So we can go ahead and just use that here. Didn't change anything with the contrast, so that should be fine. And then here's actually what it looks like if we go ahead and just plug that into the diffuse. And then with the multiply, it ends up making it a tiny bit brighter. So you can control the roughness here. The darker it is, the more reflective it's going to be. So the more contrast and the more white you have in it, it's going to be more rough. So that's something that I like here. So we can go ahead and just keep that. And I'll go ahead and copy this over since I did slightly modify it, and I'll go ahead and put it back in the shader that is applied to it originally here. So I'll just delete this and go ahead and paste the other one in. And there we go. Alright, so now that that is done, we can go ahead and take a look at the bump. So I do have a slight bit of bump in this material. And I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like right now. So let me just delete this from my preview material. And let's go ahead and plug that into the diffuse to see what is going on. So you can see it's not anything too intense. It's just a little bit of bump to offset the reflections and all that, so it looks a little bit less uniform. So that's what I went with, and the settings for this are right here. So I do believe that's mainly default settings. I probably just ended up changing the scale right here. So there are the settings for that. And for the projection, I used the box projection because the geometry is a little bit weird. It's like organic and all that. So box projection will do just fine. So that's what we went with here. And then finally, let me just delete this one. Let's go back and grab our transmission. I used the gradient, and that's how we applied the gradual shift from red to blue. You can see that here once this material updates. So there we go. So you can see it's going from red to blue to red. And that was created by simply using a gradient in the transmission tab. So we can go and show you how that was done here. Let's go ahead and paste that texture, and let's plug that into the diffuse. And once this updates, we'll be able to take a look and see how this was done. Let me make sure I have the right one. Try rendering it again. And in the meantime, we can take a look at the gradient here if it wants to work. I just have to close out of it and reselect it. There we go. So you can see it's fairly interesting looking on its own here when it's just plugged into the diffuse. So what I ended up doing is I got a gradient with a slightly brighter slash lighter red color. It's more like a pinkish at the moment, but that's the color I used. And then I also went with around the same uh, value for a blue color. So it's not too intense on this side, so it looks a little bit more natural, I guess. So those are the two colors I used, and I did use the linear interpolation. So you could go with the radial if you wanted to, but I did like the way the linear one looked. And actually, I do believe. Um, oh, actually, yeah. So that's not the linear or radial. My apologies. It would be right here. So this is the linear, and I do believe I ended up going with the radial in this case. So if we go ahead and let this reset, we can make sure that that's the case. So if we go back with radial, yep, so we'll be able to see that. Let me just delete this right here and take a look again. Okay, so it is indeed radial, and then I did make slight adjustments. So I did end up rotating it around the y-axis because if you look here, um, it looked quite a bit weird and it was kind of like cutting it off. So I ended up just looking for that sweet spot where you can see the gradient and there is no cuts or any like seams that we can see. So 90 worked just fine for me here, and that's what I ended up going with. And for the projection, I ended up going with spherical because the object is somewhat of a spherical overall shape, I guess. So that's what we went with. If I go with box or anything else here, if you take a look, it looks quite a bit weird, and the spherical is most interesting. So that's the one we went with here. So that's for the gradient. And now let's go back and take a look and see what we did for the medium tab, which is pretty much the last one we need to set up to get this material. And here are the settings for that. Density, I used around 37.5, and then volume step length, I did 22. I'm not entirely sure if that affected it, but that's what I ended up going with. And then for the absorption and the scattering, I used two different colors or two different values of red. And here they are. The first one, there are the values for that, and that's for absorption. And for the scattering, this is what I ended up going with. I went with a darker value. And putting all of this together, we'll end up getting this sweet looking, somewhat organic looking material that I went with. Now you can go ahead and choose any color you want with for the gradient. You might need to also offset and change these colors here to get it looking different from what I have. But it's all up to you. You can choose whatever colors you want in order to get this. Now, one more thing here, which is the lighting. So for my setup, what I ended up using is Grayscale Gorilla's light maps. It's a great set of textures you can use to apply to your lights here. And here is the light map I ended up going with. So let me make sure, let me actually find out the name of this texture. So if we go into area light maps and just scroll, so it would be the softbox gradient. I ended up flipping that one and using it. So if I just click on it, that would be the one. I did probably end up changing the temperature. I just turned it up a little bit more rather than having it more on the warmer colors. So turning it up to maybe 8,000 or so, that'll give us a slight blue tint to it, which I was a pretty big fan of. So that's what I went with. And it's a really simple setup. All I did was, let me unhide this. And yeah, so it's pretty much just on the side of the skull, and the camera is pointing head on. So the light kind of seeps through to the other side here. And also, it did end up changing it a little bit in post, but that was about it. And you can even make your own maps if you don't have the Grayscale Gorilla light maps, or you can just use a normal Octane light, and you can probably get away with that too. But that's just what I did, and that's what I liked. So you can feel free to do anything you like, and um, definitely share your results with me if you end up going and recreating this, because I would be very interested to see what you guys can come up with. But I really did hope that this helped you find a way of creating a similar material to this, or if you followed my previous tutorial, then there's a way for you to create this material right here. But that is about it for this video. If you have any suggestions on what I should create next, definitely let me know. I'll be more than happy to try and do that for you guys. But other than that, peace out.